Hey everyone.
I was muted. I said, hello, Ellie. And so 3 seconds in already, I did a mistake. So I'm going to...
It's bodes well for the stream.
So the way it works is I switch myself on that side. So now we can talk to each other. Hello. Okay. How's everyone? Happy April. Happy April to you too. It was, April Fool's a couple of days ago. What I didn't know about Quebec is they don't call it April Fools. They call it April Fish. And kids and people that they take a little cutout of a fish and stick it on people's backs.
Yeah. Oh, well, there we go. Well, thank you for joining today's stream.
That's all we have for today. So welcome everyone. In case you are not paying attention, we had an announcement yesterday, and we have some things to show today. That's why it's not Ask the Trainer and it's Create with Maxon. The new custom is that we don't do housekeeping at the beginning. We do it sometime in the middle or the end, whenever we feel like it, basically. And Ellie is going to show us some interesting things that happened in the Redshift space. And then we're going to follow with a few Cinema 4D thingamadoodles. If you do have a question, although this is not for asking questions, but if you do have a question, make sure you preface it with a capitalized question so we can distinguish it from all those beautiful, beautiful comments and the discussions that I usually have when I get distracted. So welcome everyone. I'm going to hand it over to Ellie. Let's see if this is going to work. Are you okay to share your screen?
Yep, all ready to go.
I need to do this and then do this. It's a new system. I have to press 2 buttons. So Ellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, how are we doing? So as Thanasis was saying, we had a new release that came out yesterday. And for Redshift, that came with one sort of slightly larger new feature than the others. And so we'll talk about a few of the different ones, but I wanted to start talking about the main one, which is a new OpenPBR shader. And basically it's going to talk through kind of the concepts of it, a few different things that we can look at, and exactly how the material structure works. And so you're probably thinking, okay, why is there a new shader? What is this new shader? Well, it's physically based, so just like the surface shader, but it's actually the industry standard for CG, and it was developed by Adobe and Autodesk. And so the benefit of this, because it's industry standard and it's optimized for computer graphics, we can create more realism within our materials because it's optimized for CG and 3D. Another benefit, and this is quite a big one if you're on or using different render engines, if you're in a production pipeline, other renderers also have this OpenPBR shader and the parameters are all the same. So now what this means is material translation and conversion from Arnold, V-Ray, kind of other render engines into Redshift is now far more accurate. So, and that's because we all have this kind of universal OpenPBR shader. So what we'll do, so I'm not just rambling on, I'll show you some actual stuff now with the shader, is if I just click this little plus, so let's actually kick my render view off. Let's click this little plus, and you will now find, when you update to 2025.4, this little OpenPBR material option. So if I just open that up and then just put that on my shadable, I'm going to talk you through the actual structure. So on the surface, the concepts are the same. So we're defining our base properties of our material, and then we use our node editor to effectively build up that material just like we would any other kind of default material or surface shader. But the slight differences here are in our base properties. So let me just pull this up, and so we can see what these are looking like. And so you'll notice that there are some similarities in some of the naming convention. And there are some things that are then relatively different. So the way this works is it's a 3 primary layered system. So we have our base layer, and our base layer determines whether or not our material is a metallic or a dielectric. So those are the 2 different material types. And then what then happens, so we're still on our base layer here, is then if we're doing a dielectric material, we then decide, are we creating a glossy diffuse? Are we creating a subsurface, or are we creating a translucent material? And you can see kind of based on these names, what we would then need to control for this. And so if we just wanted to come in and let's actually build some materials while I'm talking about it. So in our base layer, so very similar kind of settings to before, we have our normal base color weight. Our diffuse roughness is handy if we're creating porous materials. Things like sand, stone, this can be handy. And then at the moment, with our metalness on 0, we're creating a dielectric material. With our metalness on a value of 1, we're then creating a metal material. Nice and simple. Then with our specular, these are our reflections and these are our roughness values. And so again, relatively similar to before. Now we have a metal, we can define the angled reflection colors as well. So if I wanted to come in and perhaps adjust the color here, we can now see how we get this kind of edge tint going on. So right now we've created this relatively simple, sort of slightly rough chrome material. If I was trying to create a gold, I'd perhaps want to come in and just apply maybe like a yellow color to it, just to then create some kind of gold, maybe a little bit more orangey, might look a bit better. And then our roughness value, same as before, we can have a glossy or a sort of rough and diffuse material. And so there is actually a really great thing I want to show you. So this was taken from Autodesk website. And so this kind of gives you the concept of how this layering system works within the OpenPBR. So you can see we have our base. And so all here are the options for our base. And so we have the metallic base, or we have our dielectric base: metal, translucent, subsurface, glossy diffuse. So that's what we've just looked at in there. We've just looked at that glossy diffuse, and we've just looked at the metals. And the only difference here is that metalness slider, really. Then the slightly more, advanced topics are the translucent base and the subsurface base. And we'll get to these extra little bits in a minute. So if we just cut back into here, if we then wanted to think of creating, let's do some kind of like translucent material. So, that would be our glass element. So as we know, anything that has any kind of refraction, our index of refraction is quite key. So if we set this to 1.33, which I believe is water, we could come into our transmission, and then we have our weight value, which allows us to basically enable that parameter. So if we add our weight value and remove our metalness, because what you can't have is a metal transmissive material, as you can see, unless you do half values or point values. So now we can see we have our transmission going on, and we have our roughness that can affect our specular roughness, our IOR, and then inside of here, a few more of our transmission settings. So a few things to talk about in here, and this is actually also the concept for the surface shader, is not many people really talk about these different parameters in here. And I thought, hey, while we're here talking about a shader, why not talk about those kind of things as well? So if I just change my transmission color, let's set this to something like red. At the moment, what's happening is the light rays enter the object or the surface, and they get refracted, and they're now being tinted red everywhere. Doesn't matter kind of the thick or thinner areas, the sort of depth doesn't matter. It's doing a non-physical tint. So this looks okay, but if we think about it, if this object was real, the thicker areas of the object, or the depth of the object, and the size and the thickness will have an effect on the refraction color or the transmission color. So if you think about, I don't know, like Coca-Cola, for example, if we have like the thicker areas of the liquid will be darker versus the thinner areas that are allowing more light to be scattered. And that's where this depth value then comes into play, and this scatter color. So if I set this scatter color also to maybe sort of like a slightly darker red, so let's not do 100% values. And as I begin to increase this depth value, we can now see how we really are impacting the look of our material. And this is really, really key, especially for liquids and how liquids kind of respond to light, including the size and scale of our object. So if I go higher, we can now see in the thicker areas of my object versus the thinner areas, which are to do with light absorbing and scattering, we can see a more saturated version, or a sort of like a lighter and a darker version of that color. And if we go even higher, maybe that's a little bit too high. So remember, the size of your object's really key here. So something like this, we can really see in these thinner areas how we're getting a much more lighter representation. So this is when we would then create our translucent materials. The final bit would be if we're looking at our subsurface materials. And so for this, if I just let's create some kind of honey. And so I've got these some colors here that we can use. So let me just set this to something like 1.5. And then let's just change some of these colors, and let's create a bit of a, you know, honey kind of color. And for this, what we'd want is we'd then be thinking about it being a subsurface kind of color. And so, or material, sorry. So if I add my weight value here, we then have our subsurface color and our radius color. Think of the subsurface color as the color on the outside. So effectively light comes in and it gets pushed out to the surface. That is your color. And then the radius scale is the color on the inside that's being absorbed and scattered. So that's the inside of our material. And again, I've got a couple of just colors saved in here. And then what we can do is, again, our depth value is going to be quite important, as is our radius inside of here. So let me just maybe adjust this color a little bit lighter, a bit more of an orange. And let's do the same for these. I think a bit more kind of orangey in color, so look a bit more like a honey. Okay, so maybe that can go to there. So we can kind of see how, just by kind of playing around with these different values and the depth and the scattering, we can start to create more realistic looking textures, just like this honey material here. And so this is how we have to think of this layering system. And at the moment, all we're really doing still is just thinking about this kind of initial base. So if we then think of this coat and this fuzz and how we can then kind of layer these up, and we have to think about what materials would require this particular setting. So for example, if we could start again, let's just throw metal paint on there. So if we look at our metal paint options, so what this is it's just a metalness value. We have a little bit of roughness. We have no transmission and no subsurface because it's a metallic. But within my coat, what we've done is we've applied a weight value. And this is now that secondary layer over the top where we can create a coating or an additional specular or reflective layer. So if I pull this down, you can see this is what it looks without that coat layer on top. And then what we have is something that looks a bit like this. And so we can apply a coat color. So as I sort of like play around with this, you can see how this changes heavily the look. And so this is now that additional layer on top, which also has a darkening value. So this is one of the big differences between the standard surface material when we apply a coat, it doesn't really impact the color of our material. And that's because what this is doing is, because it's more physically accurate, if you have a layer over something, it prevents some of the light, therefore it creates darkening. So if I choose that, set that to 0, we have that an original base color, so you can actually disable darkening. Or if I put it up and then set this to a darker color, we can see how this changes. And again, we have IOR and roughness for that as well. So the fuzz layer, again, something slightly different to what we have in the standard surface. So this is, again, just a sort of basic sand preset that I've built for this stream, where we're using that diffuse roughness, which is great for those porous materials. We have a high roughness value. And then our fuzz, what this is doing is it's adding that the sort of like textile hairs or peach fuzz or dust over the surface of a material. And so if I just increase this value to a value of 1, and you might not be able to see it too clearly, but there's now been added this sort of additional kind of layer over the top, which is really great for these particular types of materials. We can define the color. I'm going to set it to something crazy just so you can see it. So if I set this to red, you can now see we now have, again, this extra layer on top, which are these final little, these grains or these hairs or things like that. So if we set that back, and again, all of these values have their own particular roughness setting, but we can now control them and adjust them if we want to.
My mistake, sorry.
It's okay. It distracted me, could you tell? Okay, so, and we also have, the same kind of things that we've had before, thin film emission, which is slightly different. We have it in luminance as opposed to intensity, I believe it was before. And so the other major difference in this is if we're looking at this anisotropy value. So what I'm going to do is, let me just, for the sakes of this, create a brand new material. And let's find a object that's going to look a little bit more interesting for yourselves. So have this little kettle here. And we're going to replace that material. Right. So in here, if I was looking at creating this kind of brushed chrome effect, that's where anisotropy comes in. Anisotropy is the way of stretching our reflections, and so we can create that brushed metal effect. So if I increase this anisotropy value, you'll see we're able, if we keep a look in here, we're stretching those reflections. And then what we have is nothing. And you're probably thinking, guys, have you forgotten to put the rotation input in here? No, this is actually on purpose, because this concept is now slightly different. So in the standard surface, if I come into here, you'll see we have anisotropy and rotation. Nice and simple. This is slightly different, however. So I'm going to come into my node editor for this, just to show you this. We have our base properties here. And then what we want to do is we want to just command or control click to add this anisotropy input. And then we need something called the surface tangent node. Surface tangent node outputs the rotation value from 0 to 1. So 0 degrees to 1 being 360 degrees. So what we can do is we can connect that in. And now I can come in and I can now adjust the rotation of the anisotropy, which is my now stretched reflections for that brushed effect. And where this is quite cool is we can now think, okay, this particular thing is controlling the anisotropy, and we have this rotation value, which is a 0 to 1 input. So if we think, okay, we can use other things inside of Redshift that output 0 to 1, i.e. anything that has grayscale values that go black to white, are 0 to 1. So what that means is if we take a ramp, which we know outputs 0 to 1, because it's black and white or it's grayscale, if we just set this to linear and we use this to control the rotation, we can now start to get more creative and, interesting reflective results. So we could come in and we can play around with these different values. We could double our knots, double them again, and then distribute them. And now again, interesting results. So this opens up a wide range of different possibilities within texturing, especially for brushed metals. And so if we can use a ramp, well, then we can use a Maxon Noise, because again, grayscale outputs 0 to 1 values. So if we bring out my Maxon Noise, I'm also going to show you a new feature while I'm doing this, so there is a purpose. So let's do a lower value, and then let's maybe stretch these along the y-axis, and now we can use these. And so you can see this method, it is deliberate that this sort of anisotropy is slightly different, because we now have more possibilities to control these, anisotropic values here. And while I'm here, what I can show you is, let's go back to my little shader ball and let's go into sand and let's go back into Maxon Noise. So I'm kind of like feature on feature here. So this is another little addition for yourselves that you will now find within the Maxon Noise is this rotation option. So we now have the ability to rotate on the X, Y, and Z axes. So if I kind of pull it in here, you can see I'm able to create additional rotation on my noises, which is another little cool addition. So again, also helpful for those anisotropy values. So that's a little bit of a lowdown of the OpenPBR shader and kind of the types of materials that we can create. And what I did do in the project files, all of these materials that I've been kind of like playing around with can actually be found inside of there. So yeah, feel free to have a look and break those down. And yeah, you'll probably find that this is a nicer way of creating some realism now within your CG. Any questions on that before we talk about material baking, and then I'll hand over to Thanasis?
Oh, there's a bunch of various questions. Let's take it from the top and see if we can zoom through them.
Okay.
First of all, hi from Ontario, Canada here. Likewise, bonjour from Quebec, Canada here as well. So we're not going to show liquid simulations today, but you can follow NAB. Let's see. What do we have here? Good morning, Elly. Thanks for the presets. So it will be awesome if you guys could do a quick guide on how to get the best caustics out of diamonds or jewelry. Noted. That's a good suggestion.
A lot of that will be, I'll do a very quick answer for that. A lot of that will be using photon-based caustics. Obviously, brute force are lovely and they're easy to use, but when we want accurate and sharp and clean caustics, then photon-based, and go very, very, very high. And I mean kind of, like very, very high with our number of photons. For that, increase your trace depths in your globals, your combined reflection and refraction for those. The defaults aren't good enough for, glass, transmission, perfumes, liquids, etc. Up those, and then make sure you're using small direct lights, so point and spotlights, as opposed to a dome light and a HDR and a large area light. Yeah, and there's also a diamond shader in there with dispersion. That will help.
Fantastic. A lot of love. What else do we have? Let's see. Let's see this. Is it faster to render? I would say no. It's just a different model that's based
Uh,
on. Yeah, go ahead.
It, do you know what? It is actually, and the only reason it is, so it's not for every case, but normally it will be on par with the standard surface. But in some cases, because it's what we love to call energy conserving by default, that means the amount of light coming in and leaving the surface doesn't exceed the amount of incoming light.
Mhm.
So that therefore can be slightly more optimized.
Fantastic. So it's better optimized. Overall, what I'd like to say is that all renderers pretty much try and do the same thing, and the parameters for most renderers are pretty much the very similar. The OpenPBR, there are a lot of references on the internet. It's just a way to bring the specification closer to what is considered a more universally accepted format, which is used in game engines and all sorts of other things. Otherwise, you can make things look identical using pretty much, any of these shading models. There is a question that says, can we finally convert Arnold materials to Redshift? Would you know anything about that, Ellie?
If they are made with the OpenPBR shader, I would say so.
Then you can transfer the parameters and the
And to be fair, the standard surface as well. So that was always possible because we have the standard surface. So if you're building, those two ways, you should be able to convert correctly.
Excellent. Now, this is the, this question comes up quite often. What is the difference between dielectric and metals? What I have to say about this is dielectrics are the conductors, sorry, the opposite, the insulators, anything that doesn't conduct electricity. And then the metals are the conducting materials. As far as I know, generally, although there are intermediate states, real surfaces in nature, the wave bounces off them in one of two distinct ways. And whether a material is conducting or if it's an insulator, there's a specific way the fall off is, looks like on these. That's why we have these general two categories. But generally, it's metals and non-metals. That's the distinction, the very general distinction. Any other information on this, Ellie?
No, that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Is the transmission depth in centimeters?
It is, yes. Well, in this case, yes, it's dependent on the DCC that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, the size of and the scale of your model and object are very, very important to obviously get the most correct depth or thickness value for yourself.
Fantastic. Yes. Well, they're not exactly there, right? They're slightly different. And these small differences are what we are trying to mitigate by introducing this new model, because that very small differences can create huge differences in the render. So we're just bringing things together. I guess, yeah. So you can share across renderers, and the correction here, just for the record. Oh, look who's here.
Hi, Karan.
Hi, Karan. Karan is a friend. Oh, and he's a colleague, coincidentally, but he's a friend. So, is there any difference between the new Fuzz and the old Sheen? What would you know about that, Ellie?
So yes, Fuzz is effectively also like Sheen. It's that additional layer for, velvety cloth and things like that. But it can also now be used to kind of simulate that dust and those textile fabrics. And so it's not I saw one of the questions was, is Fuzz just bump? It isn't. There we go. Good timing. No, it's an optional layer that now sits on top of the original kind of like base and specular. And so if you get up close, it isn't like bump detail. If you want accuracy, you still want to make sure you do that bump, normal, or displacement for anything that actually needs to be, detail on the surface. These are just your base properties, and then you build the material up just like you would before.
Nice. Now, I've got one. Someone's not paying attention. Demis, did you pay attention to the surface tangent node? It's got a vector input, output. So, yeah.
What did I create that in? I don't really remember. A brushed metal. Here we go. So yes, surface tangent. It also can. I saw a few people asking about more complex materials. You can UV your object and drop your UV channel in there for more complex and accurate details.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So use a tangent is what opens up that tangent option.
Excellent. Now we have an interesting question here, which it's my question as well. Do we have a converter for standard material to OpenPBR or not?
That is something I do not know, but there is normally one way of figuring it out. So
drum roll.
What should I try? Convert material to, it's already a node. I've not seen any information about it.
Yeah. I would suggest that just hammer Maxon with emails and suggestions. If you think that something like that would be useful, it will. And let Maxon know, right? And Maxon does listen. Okay. Are you still allowed internet in Canada? Yeah. Actually, I'm sending this via smoke signals, but we're quite good at that. So, yeah. Oh my God. My smoke signaler is getting a bit tired and it's raining. We are, yes. And I'm lucky because out here in the woods, I wouldn't expect to have any internet. And yet I have good enough to stream live. Fantastic. Let's see, what else do we have? Now, this is not a question. The discussion can take place in the chat. Yep, we have some very happy people. Great update. Thank you. That's what we're trying to do. Caustics. Yeah, caustics. Any speed anywhere is always helpful. I'm not going to stick just to caustics. I just wish everything can become 1,000 times faster. Would you be happy with that, Ellie? 1,000 times faster. I'm asking for too much.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the thing. We always want things to be faster. Of course we do. And unfortunately, there are things that are just what we call expensive when it comes to rendering. Caustics, you know, transmission, any kind of refraction, because the calculations have to be higher for realism. That's what it is. And especially with like brushed materials, you've got to think a light ray goes in, it gets split, it gets scattered every time it hits another surface, it gets scattered again. All of this time then involves more samples to clean things up and for more accuracy. And so there's always going to be a conversation of, you know, yeah, quality over time.
Yeah, I wish quantum computers would come out tomorrow. The problem is that the world civilization will end because AI is going to eat us all. So I don't know. Faster renders, end of civilization. I'm not quite sure yet. Well, I'll
go way out.
Yeah, we'll find a compromise. Okay, so we are having a lot of suggestions for an automatic converter. So let that be. And we have a second to that. Excellent. Okay. Hello, Drake. Happy spring. Okay, where are we? Because we are going to run out of time. So yes. What I'm going to do is mark where we are here to get on the questions later on. So, Ellie, keep going.
Yes, let me get on to material baking, and then while you're showing C4D stuff, I can always go back and answer in the chat. That's not a problem. Okay, cool. Right, so material baking. So yes, effectively what we now have is some viewport baking for our Redshift materials. I think we'll all agree that, you know, when we are building a lot of our textures and our materials inside of Redshift, we are getting not the most, you know, accurate of, examples in the viewport for our texturing, which makes things harder because we're having to now constantly use our render view or our IPR to get any kind of accuracy for what we are creating. And so things have been getting better. We now get HDRI reflections and stuff like that. But there was a few things that were still, or quite a few things that were still limited. Well, now what we have is we have viewport baking. And what's great about this, and I do mean great, and I'll tell you why in a minute, is this isn't on by default. And so within our preferences, so if I go into my preferences under renderer, we have material translation viewport export. And this can be set to baking. So if I set this to baking, what I can do is I can close this scene file and then I can reopen my scene file. And then what will happen is I then get my baking, you can see down here, my baking viewport exchange images. And what it's doing is C4D is sending Redshift the images. Redshift is kind of creating and baking its own textures, and it's sending them back to the viewport. And so you can see as it's going, more and more of these will begin to show a more accurate presentation. The good thing about this is it happens in the background, so I can continue to work inside of Redshift while it is baking these. And now we can see we're actually getting, of course, it's not, like for like yet. That is the idea. This is a first iteration, but we are getting a more accurate representation. So now I can start to, tweak my wood materials or anything within here without even having to have my render view playing. A few things to bear in mind for this. This actually happened relatively quickly, but if you think about it, the more materials that you have in your scene and the more kind of complex your textures are, the longer it will take to bake and calculate. Upside is we can do this in the back end, it happens in the background. Some other things to bear in mind, or some ways to slightly control the speed of this, is within, again, preferences, viewport hardware, default resolution for your textures. I just set mine to 512, so that's why they are kind of looking the way that they're looking. But we can set this to as high as we want. This is just for the preview baking in your viewport. Bear in mind, the higher the resolution, just like anything, the longer it will take to bake. And the other thing is there is no caching. So if you bake your scene once and you close the scene and reopen it, it does need to bake again. Remember, this is a first iteration, so all the things you're kind of potentially hoping for are also things that we are talking about without saying too much. Yeah, so that was a nice kind of addition to there, but remember, it is off by default. If you want it on, you just have to come in and switch that to baking. But I'm going to change that back to draft. And that's it, really. Yeah, the kind of the major thing, of course, is the OpenPBR. And one quick thing, and I'm talking about this, but it was in the 0.3 release. And I've seen this talked about so much online. So if I just come in really quickly, just before I hand over to you, Thanasis, I'll try not to steal too much of your time.
I was going to ask you to show it.
Yeah, I feel like it's talked about a lot. So let me just find, here we go. Let's grab this and throw this in here. Right. So I have my dome light in here.
This is a question, by the way. What happened to the tick box in the dome light for background?
Yeah, I knew this would come up because I've seen it online everywhere. So yeah, loads of people are sort of saying, "Oh, hey, where's the background option for this?" And effectively, what was introduced in 0.3 is camera ray contributions, and so it does make sense. If we are familiar with the details tab and the ray contribution, so these are the different ray types and the contribution that they have, or this light has on those rays. So it's really, really great for, really dialing in reflections, refractions, etc. We can break realism and physical accuracy if we want to. And so we have this camera contribution. So this light is having an effect on my camera rays. So if I just calm down and I remove that, I'm saying, do not be seen by my camera rays. Do not be affecting those in any way. So this is the way that we do that. And the same rules apply if I have an area light. I'm setting this to, that starts at 0. Let me rotate this, and we go like this, and you go, oh, where's my visibility options inside of here? I want to see my light. Well, all you have to do is up that camera contribution, and now you have your visible light. So if you're using mesh lights, etc., then yes, you can do that in there. So it's still there, just slightly different.
Slightly different, and it's more flexible, okay?
Yeah.
Because now you have the amount as well. It's not just an on-off switch. And yeah, we'll see how people use this in a creative way. Excellent.
Yeah.
Shall I grab the screen?
Yes, take it away. And what I'll do, I'll head into the chat and keep an eye on the questions.
Let's do this. There we go. There's my screen. So it isn't much, but it's interesting. I promise you that. Let me remove our otherwise beautiful faces so we have more real estate. I know everyone wants to see our faces, but no, you have to concentrate and look at Cinema 4D now. So let's start. Let's see where I'm going to start now. So I'm going to start from the custom properties. You may know that in 2025.1, we introduced the custom particle property. So this is an empty scene. And if you go to your scene settings, simulation, and particles, we had this thing over here under the simulation settings where we had the system properties, and then we had a bunch of custom properties. The reason we didn't do many tutorials on this, I added it somewhere, was that the interface, the way we interact with this over here was overhauled. And now we have a separate for automatic custom properties. I'll tell you what that is in a second. And then we have the manual custom properties where you can just click here, define the type, and just type a name, whatever you want, and so forth. So you have different categories like the event, booleans, timers, and substep counters, which are special types. Now, let me close this and show you why this is rather interesting, I would say. So, oh, what just happened? I managed to crash my Cinema 4D. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I do not know what just happened here. But the other day I had, let me quickly remove this and put my face here. So
we've all been there.
I've had the other day. No, it's interesting because I had an update for Windows. Now, some people love Windows, some people hate Windows. I have turned off all my automatic updates for one and only reason. I want stability. Stability for me is, especially when you're live, I don't know if you've experienced that, and you're just clicking around your software and it freezes or it crashes, just like it happened a few seconds ago. I want to have stability. I do not want any, a new driver is updated and it doesn't seem to work, and then I have to find, and yet I've turned off everything. I went to the registry, turned off updates and all that, and yet it updates. I do not know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not a PC person, but in any case, let me go here, and I have all the files here. I'm just going to open them again. Let me share my screen again. I need to actually add it to the stage because that's not my screen. There you go. So let's quickly, I'm going to do it directly here. So I was talking about the automatic custom properties, the ones you will find over here. What's great about these are predefined custom properties that are added to your scene, either from emitters. So if I go to my particles layout here and add all my emitters, all right? And then I can add things. Let's go and add a collide, for example, a follow spline, a pirate vect, a stick. I'm just adding a few of these. And let's go first to the emitters. We have this output tab, and this output tab, for each emitter, we may have different automatic parameters. For example, born, the moment a particle is born, that returns true. So we know the exact moment any particle was born. And the way the automatic ones work is you go to any of your emitters or your modifiers. Basic emitter, let's, for example, find the UVW coordinate where the particle was emitted. You turn this on and immediately it names it for you. You can always change the name, and it also adds it automatically to the automatic custom property. And that's really handy because in the first implementation, you actually had to go manually and create it and name it and make sure you have proper name, copy and paste and all that. So that has been fixed, and now these are created automatically, which makes it extremely simpler to work with. Not only the emitters, though, and each emitter, depending on how you're emitting, if you're emitting in points mode, then you're going to have a point index for the point that emitted that particular particle, or the normal direction. If you're emitting in surface mode, now you can have a UVW coordinate for that particle where it was emitted. So if you follow the tutorials I've done on Cineversity, there is one where I'm doing curl noises and all that, using normal directions and so forth. But in any case, the interface has been greatly enhanced. So it's much easier to work with. You can go and you can delete all references of a particular property so that you don't remove it from somewhere and it still exists and so forth. Now, don't forget, for anyone that's doing any caching, you can decide which particles you want to cache. Which properties you want to cache. You don't have to cache everything, and that makes your caches much, much smaller. Generally, when you cache something, you only cache the data you're going to use to render. That's the general idea. Now, in terms of these automatic properties, not only the emitters, but a lot of the modifiers that do something allow you to have certain properties. Always go to the output and you will see. So for the surface attract, the distance from the point it was attracted, or the surface normal of that point on the surface that was the particle was attracted, and the UVW coordinates of that point that attracted the particle, and it is stuck. So we can check if a particle is stuck to a surface or not. And all these parameters are available within the particle nodes modifier and the other modifiers. The pirate vector, I'm going to show you an example where we can export, we can assign the property of the density and the temperature to each particle depending on where it is within our power simulation. I've got a nice little example for that, and so on and so forth. So if you go to the modifiers, for example, the math modifier, you will see that now you can target a custom property, or you can read a custom property. So you can do all sorts of property wrangling with using any of your color mapper, data mappers, math, and so forth. The switch group allows you to record the position, the group, to record for that particle the previous group. And predator prey is interesting. You can have the count of how many it's predating before it predates, how many neighbors it found based on these parameters for pursue, for the predators, and for the prey, there you go, fleeing, the radius, how many did it find? And all these are very interesting properties you can use to do all sorts of things. Okay, so let me close this, and I'm going to start opening some of the scenes I've done to show you. Let's do UVW particles. Let's do this one. So what I've done here is I went to the mesh emitter, and I have assigned the UVW coordinate to each particle. And the only thing I'm doing here is using a particle node modifier. I'm reading that UVW, and I'm reading the material. So this is a texture in here. It's just the image I've used to texture this, exactly the same image. I just copied and pasted it from the material. And I'm using a sample shader where you put an image and the UVW coordinates. Now, because of the differences between the UVW coordinates, all you have to do is invert the V. And that's why you use this invert node, and you split this vector, and U and V there is no W in this particular case. But what you do with this is that you can assign to each and every one of the particles the color that exists in that particular U or V that you use to shade this. And there you go. I can turn this off and you'll see that the particles now are assuming those colors. It doesn't matter where they're going. They're going to hold on that color because they can go somewhere and come back and reform the pack, and everything is going to be in the right position. So that will be a nice use of the UVW custom property. Another one, particle glow. Let me go particle glow 2. There you go, particle glow 2. And what I'm doing here is I'm using a color mapper. I've created my own manual custom property that's called glow, and it's color alpha. And in the color mapper, I'm targeting this property using a random field, and I've created noise and so forth. And because I want to have an extra color to use it in my Redshift material, in the color user data called glow, I'm just remapping it to a certain color, and I'm putting it in the emission color. So now I have my particle color, so the typical color you get from here, and this secondary color. You can have as many of these colors as you want, and you can use them into anything. And when I press play, the particles are going to be generated, and they're going to have an extra glow, which means that if I start my render, you will see that there will be a nice, there you go. All these are just glowing because of that extra property. And that's just an example of how you can use any property to drive anything else in your render and so forth. Now, let me see what else do I have here that is interesting. This one is not anything really fascinating, but what I'm doing here is I'm using a time condition. And this time condition just checks if the scene time is 1 frame, which means the moment these particles are emitted, right? Their life is 1 frame. And I'm just using a very simple particle nodes modifier to take the position of these particles and put it in a vector, which I called init pos. Funny, my name is Posansis. Init pos. Anyway, sorry. And what's going to happen here is after a certain amount of time, these particles are just going to turn back to go to the position they were emitted from. That's it. It was just an experiment where I was using this condition. When their age is more than 100 frames, then start going back, because I'm just using this over here. This is a messy one, but it's not really doing, this is not doing anything. This is not doing anything. I'm just blending between the two, the values. This is how all my node setups look before I finalize them. But in any case, it's just an example that you can do all sorts of programmatic stuff using these custom properties. So let me close this and see if I have anything more fancy. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is the one. Density bubbles. This is the last one I'm going to show about custom properties. Here, what I'm doing is particle node modifier. Good. And I am using the density in the pyrovect modifier. We can tell it to transfer the density of the pyro and the temperature of the pyro to these specific properties. And all I'm doing here is using these properties to change the radius of my particles. So what you will see is that as the density is getting less, the bubbles are going to get bigger. I said bubbles when I meant particles. But just by doing this now, it's the density that controls when these particles are going to be bigger. And this looks like an interesting sort of bubble seltzer style simulation. And it took a couple of minutes to put together. Okay, that's all I have to say about custom particles. Oh my God, My brain is not working today. Custom particle properties. Maybe it's because I woke up at 2 a.m. Do you think it's that, Ellie? No.
It might be.
Yeah. Okay. So I've had enough coffee. I shouldn't feel sleepy. So let me have a bit more. Another thing that was added to particles was the ability to change the density distribution, this thing down here, because it was one of the highest requested features. So if I go to this sphere over here, and the default and the previous way it worked was that there was sort of a random but uniform distribution of particles. But now what we have here is the ability to define using either a noise or fields on the density of the born particles. So the simplest way to show this is, let me just make this quite slow. And I'm going to go here and add a linear field, make it tighter, and you will see that we get denser particle generation on this side and less dense on this side. And yeah, this can be animated, it can be controlled. You can use this to create all sorts of interesting effects. I do, there you go. So here's a test, which what I'm doing here is I'm using the vertex map, which I'm using fields with a random field. And now wherever you have the orange colors, the higher values, that's where it's generating more particles. It's not like previously where you would go and create a selection. We're not just emitting from a certain value. We're emitting fewer particles where the value is lower and more particles where the value is higher. Maybe I should go add one more zero. Why not? It's a thing with particles. You just add the zeros. We should do a series, tutorial series, add zeros. Just add more zeros until, to see the limits of your GPU. And what else do I have here? I have density fields. This is another one where I'm just directly in the mesh emitter. I've used the fields density. And although the sphere is static, the particles are emitted from these little spherical fall-offs. Excellent. Now I'm going to check. Oh, and you can also do vertex painting. So and do nice little emissions. So let's just increase this, make it editable, and let's just go here to this mesh emitter, put a vertex color. Let's go and add a vertex color here. Other tags, a vertex map, not a vertex color. Try and interpret what I'm saying today, everyone. See, and we can just go and paint a bit more. Stop this, rewind, paint a bit more, and you can see that we can control exactly where it's emitting from just by changing values, and we can use all the brush thingies here. I can add a smaller value here, and we should have a few particles coming from there. There you go, because the value is smaller. Anyhow, this is the density emission, which I find to be a very useful and highly requested. Okay. Bum, 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 bum.
Have we gone again?
Yeah. Yeah. The good thing is I have a window right there. It doesn't open. So if I want to throw my PC out of that window, yeah. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change that into a window that opens.
Yeah, I have one here.
Yeah. It's helpful to feel that you can toss your computer or your operating system. Okay.
Yeah, I envision it, and then it makes me feel better. This is the joy. Do you know what? This is the joys of technology. It just is what it is sometimes.
Okay. What I'm going to show now is one of those little things, and I'm going to leave another one more, I would say, rather important update for the end. This one here is one of the cooler ones. So sometimes we have a text and we want to align it to the camera, right? So we go here, right click and type a line, and you go here and oh, it's not a line, it's a camera. It's in the camera tags. Right click, camera tags, and it's look at camera. Okay. And you would invert it, and generally it will look at the camera. So you're going to get sort of this alignment, but then it's going to turn around and so forth. So if you're doing any graphics, you want to do any interesting typography that's always aligned to the camera, they added an align to camera plane. And this allows you to go over, and it's always parallel, and it always just works. And I just find this, it's one of those things that at some point everyone has needed this, everyone. And a lot of people use espresso or do all sorts of things, but now you just change align to camera plane, and it just works for typography that is aligned to your camera plane, which I find a very interesting and very handy feature. Okay, so the last thing is for anyone that doesn't have a Maxon-One subscription, there's a little present. If you go to the Deformers tab, what you will see is that the Rocket Lasso modifiers, spline modifiers, are now available in your main interface. And they're also available to simple Cinema 4D subscribers. You don't need Maxon-One to use the Rocket Lasso, modifiers. And if for whatever reason you haven't used them, I would say do that, because just to give you an idea, I have a single line here, just a single line. It's an side with 2, and you add the modifier once and you get this. You add modifier twice and you get this, and you add it 3 times and then you get this, right? So then you decide to change the shape of this. And I just love the stuff that Rocket Lasso and Chris do. It's because, you know, they work with users. They know what people want. So what I would suggest, I'm not going to spend time showing you. You can just go, it will be your homework for next time. Just go down here, choose any or some of these, just make a line. So here's my suggestion. So this is all you need to do. Go and make a spline or a line, and then go open this up and start randomly clicking on these over here. Just add them all, and then start adding them. So catenary curve. Oh, good. Maybe it's because this is rotated. Yep, it was rotated. So let me just rotate it back. So let's do, so there you go, catenary. Let's add a second catenary. Maybe I need to increase the number here. I don't even know how this works. Ooh, look at that. I'm going to break it. I don't want to break it. Let's add a electric spline modifier. That's a cool one. I love this one. I used it in one of my tutorials as well. Let's change this to text, and just grab these 2 and put them in here. And now you have funky text. In any case, now these are available to everyone with a standard Cinema 4D subscription, and they're available on the main interface. So you can use them without having to go to the asset browser. And yeah, I think that's all I have. Did I forget anything, Ellie?
No, I think that's everything. I've just been going through trying to answer some of the questions that we've missed, or that I've missed from the beginning.
Let's check the questions.
And just kind of on this one, I was about to reply to this, but I thought, hey, why not? Is there a way to have camera raise contribution off by default? So yes, effectively what it is now as of 0.4 is for all lights other than the dome light, it's off by default. So yeah, that is the preferred kind of workflow. So yeah, in 0.3, they introduced it and it was on by default and it was a value of 1 by default. But now what it is your dome lights are a value of 1. So they're on by default, just like they were before. And as far as I know, in area lights, I haven't tested the others, but in area lights, it's set to 0 now for 0.4. So you're all good.
The other thing I need to remind people that you can save presets. So with any object, is there any reason this wouldn't work in Redshift? It works, as far as I know.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let's assume I want a light that has a target and a null called target, and this is here.
You know, there's a button for that.
I know. Just
It's
because I can't think of anything else to do right now. So there you go.
I know this because I'm lazy.
Good. So I have this thing called hello. You can actually go and make your own preset. You can just go and create a new category and just drag this thing in your whatever. Hello. There you go. So there it is. So I create a new scene. Did I say in my scene? And you double click and hello is here. So you can do this and create a bunch of things you need. You can put them on your okay.
It's not your day today, but
it's not my day today. No, it's not my day today.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing I was going to say is when Elly shares her screen, you can save a default in the attribute manager. No default. You can a preset. You can actually do that in the attribute manager. Just select any. I can fire up my own cinema.
Yeah. No. So were you talking about in his side of here?
Yes.
Yeah. We can save a preset. Yeah. Yeah. Like you said.
So you can create the object and then go and select a preset. You can have 3 or 4, 10, 20, 100 presets, whatever. So there are many ways to customize, and you can drag things on your interface to make them accessible. So you can make your own palettes, like I've done with my particle palettes. So this is how I use, my particles. I've created this, and I even have a tutorial that shows how you can do this. Yeah. What other questions do I have?
So there was another one. If we can flip back to my screen, there was one that was saying from Dimizar, are there any new Maxon-One exclusive capsules in this update? Yes. So if you go to Asset Browser and you go new capsules, that's where you can find all the new ones that have been recently added for, these kind of ones here for Maxon-One. So you just hit the new capsules option and then you can find them.
Oh, Constellation. I didn't talk about Constellation. This is new, right? It wasn't in 2025. Oh, yeah. Okay. Can you? Oh, I don't have the question. Can you remove that from? Oh, there we go. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let me now. I'm so confused here. Let me remove this. They've changed the interface on StreamYard, and it was a one-click thing. Now it's a two-click thing. So Constellation. Everyone's going to love this. This is the Plexus plugin that we find in After Effects. It's a generator. You can put any object that has points, spline, and so forth. But you can also put a particle simulation. So I'm going to just create a sphere, drag this in here, and it will create connections and links with the closest points. Constellation. Oh, it needs a link. Sorry about that. There we go. And 40. There we go. Look at that. It's creating live these connections based on proximity and all sorts of things. It can create objects, it can create splines, you can reduce this, you can expand this, you can change the radius of those little things. Anyway, go check it out because Rocket Lasso made this and it's very performant. I do have a tutorial that shows what the logic of creating something like this is, but this is a full-featured generator, and it works, has a lot of modes and so forth. So that's the one I forgot. What else do we have? Plexus in After Effects, yes.
Just going through some of the other questions. So there was another one asking about the material properties on the OpenPBR. Does it support volumes, hair, thin film, anisotropy, subsurface scattering? So thin film, yes. Anisotropy, as we saw, yes. Subsurface, yes. Anything for volumes, you'd be using the volume shader. And anything
these are surface. Yeah, this is the OpenPBR is a surface descriptor, not a volumetric descriptor. It's a totally different way these are approached.
Yeah. So volumes and hairs, you'd use a different shader, but thin film, anisotropy, and subsurface, yes, as you can see in the sort of little breakdown of the differences, the different properties in the shader. There is one for thin film, subsurface, and anisotropy is under specular.
I want to show. So, can you make the connection lines rope dynamics too with any lines? I don't know. So this is a very good opportunity for you to go download 2025.2 and yeah, in the next stream, let us know. Excellent. You got your homework, Derek.
I reckon you could if you put it in a connect.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. The question would be mostly, you know what? Let's go here. I mean, it's crashed.
You want to try it.
Yeah, of course I want to try it. So let me put fewer points. So search distance, I'm going to make it smaller. Now, because these are not tied to a specific point, if we take this, it's generating splines. I don't know what's going to happen, but what's the worst that can happen? So let's go.
It might crash again for the fifth time.
Rope simulation. Yeah, who cares? I don't care. Now, when we have changing point counts, rope doesn't work because it requires exactly the same point. So no, it doesn't work. What you could do, though, if you want it to look like rope, you can go and add the catenary curves. And catenary will sag these, and it will make them appear that they have some sort of sagginess. And maybe you can animate this. I don't even know. Just there you go. Oh, spider webs and so forth. Yeah, so you do need to have a constant point count if you want to use spline dynamics. Plus, the other thing, which is always, the thing with any kind of dynamics, is if this is, for example, and this is a very generic thing, if this is a rope, right? What kind of animation we have set on the points won't work after the simulation takes over. You will have to sort of mix them by using the mix animation. Because at frame 1, regardless of what keyframes I have here, I may want to keyframe this in that position. It just won't work because the points are moved exclusively by the effect of the simulation. Unless, as I said, you go and you mix them a bit, and then you're going to get a sort of a mix between the simulation and the keyframed animation. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, so I think Tobias, I'm not going to put it online. Please download, check it out. I have an issue with my computer. Why not? I'm going to put it up. I've crashed 3 times. Elly hasn't. And I guess, I'm having my little issues here. But if you do have instabilities, the best thing you can do to help us is simplify your files that can show a reproducible crash or bug and all that. And please send them to Maxon, because every situation is unique. And the more of these reproducible bugs or crashes Maxon can have, the easier it is to pinpoint the source of these problems. So you're doing us and yourselves a favor if you can, push this information towards us. And yeah, we are very thankful.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing to remember. There are obviously endless possibilities within sort of computer, different graphics cards, different OS systems. And when you develop tools, in the rate at which our amazing developers are creating these things, to ensure that they are of course, completely solid and stable on every single one of these different endless possibilities, comes with its challenges. And so, like Thanasis said, the more people who tell us on this system, on this GPU, this happened to not work, then brilliant, we can get a bug fix out, and then it limits the possibilities of that happening again. And so, a lot of people give me a bit of stick for being on a Mac, and I accept that. But like you said, it was working fine.
This here, it's not my screen recording. It is a particular driver thing. It started, I would say, a couple of weeks ago. In my case, the other thing that a lot of people don't know is that some of these bugs, they're triggered from all the middleware that exists between the vendors, the hardware vendors, and the software company, Maxon in this particular case. And some of these things, Maxon has actually, or no other software company has any power to fix it, or it's too hard of a solution. They need to circumvent the driver problem. But what Maxon does, because it collaborates with all the hardware vendors and all that, it pushes the potential bugs for the drivers or whatnot to these companies. So AMD, NVIDIA, Intel, Microsoft, and so forth. So Maxon is not idly sitting around saying, "Oh, it's not our fault." There's a lot of effort that goes that is put in to make sure that all these things will and should be resolved. So no one, twiddling their thumbs. And I, have to say that you have to take my word for it. So please let us know if you have instabilities and so forth. Excellent. There we go. Here we have a testimonial. Well, great identifier bug I found a few weeks ago. They also put it in the top of the priorities. Yes, they're, they do their best. We do our best. Anyway, very quick. I'm going to close with a quick housekeeping. So I'm going to bring up my housekeeping thing. Don't leave. Subscribe. Turn on the notifications. Go ahead, Ellie.
So they don't forget to download the project files as well from the things that you were working on and the OpenPBR presets. You can download them for free.
Boom! Download the project files from the link in the description text below. Okay, go do that. And let me share my screen here. And I'm going to paste a link which you can use to go to this page that has stuff. This is, I was going to paste it in the private chat. That would have been a waste of a paste. So go to this link. It will take you to this page here. Let me maximize the monitor. And this page will allow you to go to the Maxon events. If you go to maxon.net, you will see the announcement and all that. Maxon events, everything that's happening. Oh, look at this beautiful perfume.
Who made that?
Look at this cute chap. Yeah. So use the links over here to go to the Maxon events page. The videos you're watching live right now will be hosted on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. Even if you're watching it on the Maxon YouTube channel live, we only host them here with the extremely helpful contribution from our very good friend and mentor, Dr. Sassy, that adds timestamps and comments and gives us feedback on the content we make. We always try to be better than we are. Don't forget to go to the Maxon ZBrush YouTube channel and learn how to use ZBrush so that you can envy all the amazing artists and maybe become an object of my envy because I can't do these
They're
things.
doing their What's New later today as well, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Has it started?
No, I think it's later today. There's a good few hours, I think, in between.
Yeah, they're streaming from the Pacific time zone. So, yeah. Oh, there you go.
No,
oh, no, ZBrush. No, this is 23 hours ago. That was yesterday. What video is this? No, 132. What am I talking about?
Oh, maybe it was yesterday after the Red Giant one.
No. This is the release video. Yeah. Not only I'm confused myself, I'm confusing Ellie as well. Don't forget to go to Cineversity and check out. This is the new video I did that explains the custom properties in a bit more detail. But generally, just go to Cineversity and filter by a search term And Chris Smith was kind enough to create tutorials for all these new modifiers that were added. And yeah, I think that's all I have for today. Stay in touch. You can find me on Twixer, Twitter, X, whatever you like. My DMs are open, and ask your questions, and we'll be with you. Oh, if anyone's going to be at NAB starting in a few days, what do I need to do? I need to remove my screen and add our faces. There you go. So I'm going to be at NAB in the great company of a lot of my good friends. EJ and Jonathan Wimbush is going to be there, and a host of other people. We're going to have a great time. If you're around the Nevada area, close to the desert, come and visit us.
Stop rubbing it in.
Oh, you've been to a lot of these events.
I have.
Anyway, let's let the people go and download 2025.2, and yeah, let us know how it goes. Elly, everyone, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. You need to say something until I find the buttons I need to press.
Okay.
Glasses. There you go. I think it's where it says end screen. Correct. Bye-bye, everyone.
Correct.